said Frank. The July 24th, 2023 meeting of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. DeFlorio. Ms. DeFlorio is present. Mr. Johns. Mr. Johns is present. Mr. Long. Mr. Long is present. Ms. Vecchio. Ms. Vecchio is present. Chairman Hebert.
Here.
Chairman Hebert is present.
Is there anyone signed up for the public forum?
There is not.
Is there anyone present who would like to, not signed up to speak, who would like to address the committee at this time? Seeing none, the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. You have the June 29th, 2023 minutes before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. The next item on the agenda is new business. Mr. Clerk.
Referral number 23-0224. Authorize an intermunicipal agreement with the Monroe #1 Board of Cooperative Educational Services for the Monroe County Sheriff's Office School Resource Program.
Moved by legislator Johns, seconded by legislator DeFlorio. Is there any discussion? Legislator Vecchio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are any of the SROs going to be?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Will any of the SROs be armed?
Good afternoon, Kim Hinckley, counsel for the sheriff. To the currently the sheriff's office has two SROs, one with Churchville Chili and one with BOCES. This is a continuation of the BOCES agreement. And yes, they are armed.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral number 23-0239. Authorize an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Pittsford for the collection of residential food scraps as part of Monroe County Food Scraps Collection Pilot Program.
Moved by legislator DeFlorio, seconded by legislator Johns. Is there any discussion? Legislator DeFlorio.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, can you tell us who selects the 500 Pittsford residents that will be participating in the pilot?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that will be on a first come, first served basis. And the town of Pittsford will handle the registration process with its residents.
So through the chair, this will be, just to confirm, these will be volunteers.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Thank you. Through the chair, can you tell us why or how Pittsford was the community selected for the pilot?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there's a number of criteria that we identified that we thought would be ideal for a pilot program. Again, as part of the pilot program, we want to learn what works well and maybe what doesn't work well so that it can be replicated properly in the community and be scalable. And the criteria, some of the criteria that we were looking at that were important were population density. Those towns that had existing yard waste programs in place and others that had environmental initiatives as part of their program in the town itself. And we did identify a number of towns. In fact, we began an initial discussion with one particular town, but they didn't feel that they had the resources to be able to dedicate towards a pilot program. Pittsford was identified as a good candidate program because of their population density, a very well-established yard waste collection program that does both leaves and brush in their community. So the residents are accustomed to that. And we expect we have a lot of willing partners in the community. In addition to that, they have a number of environmental initiatives that quite notable. They're designated clean energy community. They've got the green print, and they're part of Monroe Community Power. So they've identified environmental programs as a priority. So we needed a willing partner, and they were very enthusiastic to collaborate with the town. Again, with the intent that we're going to have meaningful and measurable results that we can use to provide as a baseline for other communities that may wish to develop a compost program in their town.
And through the chair to the administration, is there any concern since to use your words, the town is enthusiastic, the residents that are going to be participating are volunteers? Is there any concern that there may be inherent bias in the results of this study as a result of everything that you just described?
Through Mr. Chairman, a very fair question. We want to make sure we get representative data that can be used in other towns. For instance, the reason population density is important is that we want people close to where collection drop-off points could be. In other communities that maybe are more rural, we would probably emphasize those residents who are interested in composting to do so on their own property. They might have much greater acreage. It may not be as convenient to go to a drop-off place. But the short answer is we need the data to measure things like contamination, volume generated, things like data like that we can use to provide to other towns. Every town's different in our community, as we know, and we would have to interpret the data for each town differently based on the criteria that I talked to you about.
And through the chair to the administration, so the participants, I just want to make sure I understand, the participants will be receiving a lidded collection bin, but then they need to bring the scraps to a drop-off point. Is that correct? Because you had mentioned, I thought you mentioned something about they were used to putting their stuff out to the road with brush and leaves, but that's not what's going to happen here. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Chairman, that is correct. We will provide the residents with a brown 5-gallon pail. They'll be labeled appropriately. It'll have a lid. It'll be up to those residents to bring their pail of food scraps to a centralized location. This happens to be the dog park on East Street in Pittsford. And there'll be a QR code. They'll scan it, they'll put their name, the date, and the quantity that they're disposing, and any comments they have. We want critical feedback from those residents to see how well the program's working and the level of participation.
And just one last question. So are these collection storage containers, are the lids locked or sealed in any way in terms of rodents? I know that we've had bear sightings in in Monroe County in the last couple of years. So
Through Mr. Chairman, the vendor natural upcycling will be providing toters, 64-gallon toters that'll have lids. They will not be locked. But fortunately, it's near a town facility. The Parks Department happens to be close to there, so they will be able to monitor the site for any activity that may not be consistent with the program requirements.
And I'm sorry, I lied. One last question then. So is it town staff or county staff that will be administering and facilitating this program, or is it both?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it'll be a combination of both. Jasmine Guevara is here. She's our solid waste administrator. She'll really be overseeing the program as a whole, but members of her staff as well as town public works department will participate in this as well too.
Thank you.
Through collaboration. Thank you.
I yield the floor.
Any other discussion from okay, I have a few questions. Mr. Garland, when you were responding to legislator DeFlorio, you used the term "we," which I assume includes you. Who is the rest of the "we" in the decision-making process that you referred to?
Through Mr. Chairman, we I would say it represents members of my DES team as well as coordination with the county administration. But also we rely on the input that we received from the Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee in terms of establishing priorities, especially for food waste collection at county facilities, which this program will include. And also other drivers such as the county's local solid waste management plan too is establishing food waste organics is a priority.
Thank you. And there are no commercial participants in the pilot. Is that because it is not expected to include commercial participants in the future? like perhaps a small restaurant. I mean, the larger ones, the Wegmans and stuff, I believe are going to be included in some other program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to you, natural upcycling happens to service Wegmans now presently at all their stores in the Northeast and particularly here locally in Monroe County. So natural upcycling is the vendor that's been selected. They responded to our request for quotes. They provided the lowest price. This program is focused solely on residential food scrap collection. As part of our organics management plan, which has come before your honorable body, we will be exploring opportunities for organics, recovery and recycling, whether it's commercial, industrial or institutional, and even agricultural.
So just to be clear, that's out of the scope of this pilot. All the things.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Thank you. How long will the pilot run? It may have been a referral, but I don't.
To you, Mr. Chairman, 1 year.
I also don't see anywhere the actual cost of the program. You said you have quotes, so it sounds like you have them. Could you please? share them?
Yep, through you, Mr. Chairman, we're budgeting the program at $25,000. We were notified that with a pre-notification letter from New York State that we'll be receiving a grant. Will come before your honorable committee with that grant that will cover 75% of the cost. The cost of the program includes public education materials, which is very critical for the residents to know how to recycle their food scraps properly, minimize contamination. That's another important metric in the program. But we're providing the buckets, yes, the pails as well. And the total cost for the pails is approximately $6,300. And the cost for our estimated cost for the, I should say the quoted cost for the food scraps collection and recycling is approximately $15,775.
Thank you. And Legislator DeFlorio asked you about rodents and bears and things. And I read your response as talking about the centralized location concern, not necessarily the brown bucket sitting at my curb concern. Is there you have any comments you can make around that, please?
Yes, to you, Mr. Chairman, the brown buckets will be the residents' obligation to keep them indoors and not outdoors until they're ready to bring those to that centralized collection point where there's a lidded toter. So the 5-gallon pail, we would advise a resident not to keep them outside for the reasons you mentioned, so that it doesn't attract vectors.
Let's hope they don't have any vermin inside the house. Okay, give me just 1 second, please.
Through Mr. Chairman, that could be in the garage per se, but somewhere that doesn't create a nuisance on their property.
That 107-year-old we were talking about has lots of vermin in his garage. Prior to heading to a vote, I'd like to receive a commitment from the administration to have the Climate Action Plan Committee review this legislation and pilot program and provide a written review and report to the legislature by the Friday prior to our next full legislature meeting. If we can receive this commitment, I don't see any need to formally refer this to the administration. And, let's just save us the delay. Can the administration commit to this?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the Climate Action Advisory Committee has a full scheduled meeting on Monday, August 7th, day before the full legislature meets. If I may respectfully ask, I do have that on the proposed on our agenda. And if I may ask the committee to consider it at that time. and have a response to you prior to full legislature.
My concern with that is that tends to come in at like 5 o'clock on the day of the full ledge meeting, which is effectively not coming in time to have any meaningful review. Is there a way to expedite that at all?
Through Mr. Chairman, if we could, again, respectfully request that that be provided to you by noon on Tuesday, August 8th. If I may, I would expect, as I've seen the advisory committee act, they generally will take a vote after a presentation has been made. I would go into a very similar detailed presentation with the committee, answer all of their questions. Assuming we have a quorum of voting members, they could simply vote and then prepare a letter saying, based on the information provided, the presentation that was given, that they, again, I would expect, recommend the report. Because again, it's consistent with the recommendations that are in the climate action plan itself.
I'm actually looking for more than just a recommendation. I'm looking for some comments and some thought around this, if they have any concerns, et cetera. Maybe I didn't make that clear. I'm sorry.
No, through Mr. Chairman, I did hear that. I mean, in some respects, this program is an outcome from their direct recommendations. So again, we haven't presented the details to them because we were still working through those details. I would expect, well, I understand what you've asked. But like with other programs, we have presented technical details, and they like the CPACE financing was one that we presented, and they wholly endorsed that program. I believe they could give meaningful input at that committee, which they could capture in a letter and again have back to your honorable body by noon on Tuesday. I can.
Thank you. Let me ask the committee members, does noon on Tuesday give you time to review prior to full ledge? Getting some no's.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Got some helpful input. We can certainly provide a cost breakdown of the program, the elements within the program. We can provide the grant. Again, this is information for your honorable body and this committee to consider. Have that well in advance by the deadline that you asked for. In the presentation materials that I expect to provide to the committee. Maybe more information that you're asking for, but I think it will be comprehensive enough for this committee to consider. It'll be the same information presented to the committee itself. And if the committee has any recommendations, I guess I would encourage them to include those in their letter, but maybe I would expect that it will be a full endorsement from the committee.
Okay, I'm going to treat that as a yes response, with a qualified yes. And I'm going to put some additional quality. So thank you for that, Mr. Garland. I would ask that the cost estimates and breakdowns be provided, equipment purchases, staff allocations, overview of the program, how it works, et cetera. Like Legislator DeFlorio, I wonder about the selection of the pilot participants, since 2 of them are essentially part of the county government. And the third is a very pro this environment, whether or not the findings will be relevant to places like Hamlin or the east side of Webster, my district, or, east side of Penfield, even. How it works for residents from drop off, what the next step of the pilot program become if it was deemed successful. I'd like to add that the legislature reserves the right to table or formally refer this at the full ledge meeting if insufficient information is provided, or if nothing is obtained, which I'm sure it will be. With this commitment from the administration, we'll now vote. So all those in favor, please signify. Legislator Florio.
One other question through you to the administration, if you will so allow. Because your question made me think of something. Is there an intention that the outcome of this pilot will then, I guess, change this at any point in the future from voluntary to required? Like the recycling program right now is required of all residents. And to legislator, or Chairman Hebert's, comments, if we are selecting a pilot based on a group of volunteers that are, perhaps excited to do composting, and we extrapolate that into now the whole county is going to have to do composting, I would have deep concerns over that.
Through Mr. Chairman, and I share your concern as well too. We don't want this pilot program to be a one size fits all for the community, that, that each town should adopt this exact program. We'll learn from this. And if we need to conduct another pilot in a different demographic area, that might be a recommendation. I firmly believe we need to crawl before we walk before we run with food scraps recycling. There are some communities in this country that have mandated food scrap recycling that is very costly and it is very challenging. The city of Rochester is still conducting a pilot program. The Village of Fairport's conducting a pilot program, but looking for those that are volunteers to participate. Because food scraps recycling it has challenges that are much different than the residential curbside recycling that we're all accustomed to. So the intent here is to really assess this program. Where I've seen other programs been successful, it's because there's people who want to do it. They choose to do it versus they've been mandated to do it. So again, we'll be looking at it from every angle. The organics management plan will be looking at that from every angle. Again, the organics, this is one set of data that we'll be receiving to look at what works for Monroe County. And the organics management plan will look at all those different disciplines, if you will, different sources of organics material to determine really what works well for this community and what's the right thing for the environment. Again, it's a triple bottom line. It's the environment, it's a social benefit, and the economic benefit.
Thank you. And then one other, I guess, just clarifying follow-up question. So, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the intent or the goal of this program is not to, in the near future or even distant future, looking to mandate this across Monroe County. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And I apologize. Does anybody else have any questions? All right. Seeing no further questions, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral number 23-0240. Acceptance of a grant from the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services for the Ignition Interlock Device Non-Installer Enforcement Program and authorize an intermunicipal agreement with the city of Rochester.
Moved by legislator John, seconded by legislator DeFlorio. Is there any question? No questions. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral number 23-0241. Acceptance of a grant from the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services for the Raise the Age legislation and authorize intermunicipal agreement with the Rochester City School District for an administrative and education liaison provider for Raise the Age youth.
Moved by legislator DeFlorio, seconded by legislator Johns. Is there any discussion? Go ahead.
I had a question about the term. It shows April, March 23, and just wondering about the timing of that. Wondering what is the significance of the
Chairman, prior to this calendar year, it's been the practice of the Office of Probation and Community Corrections to wait until New York State sends their official approval letter for our Raise the Age program application. Since this fiscal year, April 22 to March of 23, relied on that. This referral is coming to you so late because New York State has consistently been late with their approvals. Beginning in calendar year 2023 with our 23 budget, probation and community corrections has been budgeting these appropriations in advance, so we no longer have to wait going forward for state approval, which is always come.
Any other questions, Legislator Long? Legislator Vecchio?
Chairman, through you to the administration, do we have any data to review on?
Through the chair, Christine Durante from the Office of Probation Community Corrections. We can get data for you. This specific referral is for not only acceptance of the Raise the Age funds, but the contract with the Rochester City School District for their educational liaison. And we do have data of how many youth that education liaison works with. It's rather extensive, so I can get that for you.
Yeah.
Through the chair, absolutely.
All right,
Sorry.
go ahead,
Got ahead
Legislator
of
DeFlorio. You already had the floor, but I'll give it back to you.
Thank you. Are you done? Okay. Through the chair to the administration, I know that you indicated that you had data on the educators that are working with these youths. Do they work with them at the detention center directly, or how does that work?
Through the chair, the education liaison is an education liaison for the Office of Probation and Community Corrections. It's not for the detention center specifically. So the educational liaison not only works with youth coming out of detention that have been sentenced to probation, but also youth that are on our diversion program that never enter detention whatsoever.
Thank you. So just to clarify, through the chair to the administration, the educators that are working with the youth that are actually at the detention center then are separate.
Through the chair, yes. This is for a contract for one administrative individual that works with us to help liaison and plan for the youth that are involved in our agency.
Thank you. And I guess I'm gonna play devil's advocate here through the chair to the administration. Is one position sufficient for the number of youth that are currently in the program?
Through the chair, this is not an educator that delivers education to youth. This is an administrator that assists with us planning for the youth that have been involved in our agency.
Thank you. Sorry, you had to drive that in with a hammer. I apologize for that. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you. Are there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. There being no other business to come before this committee, the July 24th, 2023 meeting of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee will be held on Monday, August 21st, 2023 at 5:30 p.m.